Hi, everyone. I'm Camille Miller. I'm the Executive Director and founder of the Natural Life Business Partnership. And today we are doing a member spotlight. It is May 23rd of 2018. And our member spotlight is Spiritual Response Technique with Seccia Harnden. Hello, Sue-Ann. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Seccia Harnden. I'm an energy medicine practitioner and teacher, the owner of Fifth Dimension Healing Energy, and also a new part of my business is focused on a brand that I call the Holistic Pet, which I do in concert with another practitioner, Cindy Rounceville. So my energy medicine practice is wide-reaching. I leverage a lot of modalities in terms of energy medicine to help clear and balance people's energy fields. Things that you may have heard of, such as Reiki, flower essences, crystals, emotional freedom technique, and something we'll talk about this morning, which is called spiritual response technique, otherwise known as SRT. And you might have heard of the spiritual response technique. Sometimes it's called spiritual response, treatment. So it just depends on where you are in the world. And some of that is really more of the legality of the language, but SRT is fairly well recognized by practitioners as spiritual response technique or treatment, or therapy, I think is the other word that you'll sometimes hear. And really what SRT is all about is it is a spiritual healing technique. It is going to work with your energy, your levels of consciousness, and it's going to be working with your soul records up in the Akashic record. So let me tell you a little bit about it. We all have this connection with our spiritual committees, our spiritual selves, and there are many roles and offices in our spiritual committees that serve us throughout our journey here, embodied as spiritual beings in a human form in a body. And we all have connection with those committees and those roles and the helpers, so to speak, that are here to help us on our journey of learning. The one that we like to work with and that we need to be working with in the spiritual response technique is called High Self. High Self is a consciousness and a spiritual committee member that works exclusively in our Akashic records. And the Akashic records you may have heard of are the Hall of Records or our soul records. They are the records, if you will, of all things that have happened or will happen or are happening for each and every soul in terms of their experience. So part of understanding this technique is understanding that we have the ability to have our entire journey as a spiritual being in spirit, but we also have the opportunity to be in a body, to embody and incarnate into a physical form. And in the process of making that decision spiritually, deciding to come and have an experience in a physical form, we become and create a physical form. To do that, we come through many layers and levels of learning and records that come with us from past experiences, if we have come down in the physical body before, and all for the purpose of spiritual learning. That's kind of what it's all about at the end of the day. So what happens as you decide to go through that incarnational process is you think of it like sometimes you've heard the term Earth School. We're here on Earth for learning purposes, right? So when you come to Earth School, you go to the big filing cabinet in the sky and you pull out your folder. And in your folder is a list of all of the curriculum. Spirit gives you some core learning experiences. We all get those. And then you get to pick a bunch of electives on the way down. How you're personally going to have an experience in your existence in your human form, whether you're male or female, the type of family experience, certain characteristics, your physical form, things that you just as a soul choose to put into your spiritual experience. And you create this elective and this core curriculum, and all your incompletes, if you've had learning experiences that haven't been accomplished or checked off from prior experiences when you came into physical form, those things come back down with you as well. So you basically, when you incarnate, come through all the different levels of learning and pick up all of these experiences and create your human form, you're coming down with a package of potential experiences to enact in your human form. And when you're creating it at the spiritual level, your soul and your spirit's all into it. You know exactly what you're doing. The challenge is we then come into physical form and we forget that's what we're here to do. So then the struggle occurs, right? Things happen to us and we don't really know why, or we get into dysfunctional patterns and we don't know why, or things happen and they don't really feel like us and we don't know why. And that's where a technique like SRT can be really helpful. So it is a spiritual clearing and healing, and it can influence at the spiritual level, the mental, emotional level, as well as the physical level. Energy patterns can all be cleared. We clear subconscious programs, and we can basically clear out the negative or limiting or blocking side of your programs or your patterns. And the idea is to return you to free will choice. So this technique is not, it's not a reading. It's not, we don't predict the future. Even if we clear you, we know the programs are cleared, and the limiting or blocking sides of those patterns that you are experiencing that are preventing you from making positive choices or having the experience and moving through it, check the box, so to speak, can occur without extra suffering and pain along the way, right? Because, you've learned what you needed to learn, and now you can move through it into another experience. But it doesn't prevent things from happening, right? It doesn't, because this is a free will planet, so we have free will. So you could choose to recreate a whole bunch of what you may perceive as painful experiences after clearing, but you may be doing that from a free will positive choice because for whatever reason you feel you still need to have that experience. So it's important to understand that. Now, I'll get into what the technique is and how it works in a minute, but we all have this ability to connect directly with our high self. So why would you work with a person who's an SRT practitioner or teacher or consultant? And I'm a practitioner, by the way. There are levels of training for people to become consultants, and then also for people to teach the system of SRT. So different levels of education and experience. And I have been working with SRT first as a client since 2009 for about 2 years myself to work on clearing out programs and patterns and kind of cleaning up a bunch of clutter and junk in my life that I wanted to get rid of. And then I became a practitioner through training from, I think, 2012 was when I first did my training. So basic and advanced level practitioner. So we all could do that, right? We all have this innate ability, but why would you work with someone who is a practitioner? And it's just because we have been trained in the methodology and the modality of working through clearing these programs and these energies faster for you. And just in my own experience of working with this since, well, now it's 9 years, the process and the clearings have gotten exponentially faster with the techniques that we have for a number of reasons. The most basic is that for all of us, we have had a lot of spiritual awakening and our consciousness has been raised. And so we are actually much more likely to want to release and let go of these old patterns and these dense, heavier patterns or negative patterns a lot faster to free up for new positive experiences. So just having somebody who's trained in the methodology can help you clear those things faster. But in general, everybody is clearing faster. It's just that you can get through a lot of things more expeditiously, and you can also explore different areas that can be cleared. People think of some obvious things like trauma, emotional challenges, physical things, but the technique really works across a very wide variety of challenges and issues that people have. So I'll get into that in a second and just bring this up. So that's a little bit about it. The technique itself, let me go back here, has really got 3 parts. When you come for clearing, you make an appointment. It can be done in person. It can be done over something like Zoom or Skype. It can be done as a phone consultation. It can actually be done offline where you've had a conversation or you've sent an email and you've made an appointment and you just say, I'd like X, Y, and Z type things. This is my situation, my challenge, my problem. And then I can just do a clearing for you offline and then debrief you or not, depending on your preference. And the reason I say that is sometimes even when we do the in-person or the virtual clearings, one of the main things about this technique is things will come up. Sometimes you do get things that come up from a past life or a story kind of emerges, a pattern of things get cleared in a session and you can start to see a pattern, developing. And the idea is really for people to clear it, let it go, release it, not to to understand it. Like when you hear things that come up in the clearing, if I'm talking through the clearing with you, I always tell people just sort of let it wash over you, like let it go in one ear and out the other, because I don't want you to reattach to it emotional energy and rebuild energy on it that may reestablish that pattern for you. So a lot of times it is better if people have really challenging things to just, go lay on the couch, listen, if it's a phone session or do an offline clearing, and then we can just talk about generally what came up so that you know the kinds of things that you were able to release and move on from. So we would make an appointment, we would set up a session. Typical initial session is about an hour and a half. That's because it usually takes a little time to explain the technique. Also, the first clearings tend to have a lot of things to clear and release for people. And the clearing itself has three parts. It has the initial connection, which we do prep to work, where we're creating a connection. And we're actually working as a team with the spiritual committee. So it is me and my high self working with you and your high self. And together, we are going into the Akashic records, and it's really high selves that are actually doing the work. I am facilitating, and I am actually doing that through the use of some charts. This is an example of one of the SRT charts. Master, I don't know if you can see that. And a pendulum, which is going to guide us around the chart to the areas that need clearing. So we'll establish our connection with high self, make sure it's clear, clean, neutral, right? I am not predicting, guiding, or directing this. It is really just information coming down from high self through me and actually through the pendulum, because we use a questioning technique. So the pendulum can give us a yes, no, or a working signal that some kind of clearing or activity is happening up in the Akashic records. The main part of the clearing is called research. That's where we go from chart to chart. There are many charts that have been channeled for us to use in this technique, and we are guided from high self to which chart to go, what areas to clear, and then ask for clearing and releasing of whatever negative energies or whatever needs to be cleared, from the information on that chart for that person. And the last part of the technique is called mop-up, and mop-up is where we don't necessarily need to do research, but the high self committees would just go in and kind of clean up everything else that needs to be cleared and released and cleaned up, and then the session is complete. So after your first session, you can do them fairly quickly. I've had clients who, will call in for like a 30-minute session. Sometimes you need a longer session. So, we can consult about what time level is appropriate for what you're doing based on what your challenge is and what you're trying to clear. So that's a little bit about the technique. Now, what would this be for and who would this be for? So the kinds of things that are great for SRT and has been used around the world. It's, again, as I said, it's about releasing negativity, breaking old habits, breaking dysfunctional patterns or cycles of energy. So I like to say, different day, same junk, right? It's different day, different zip code, same stuff happening. It's a pattern you just can't get out of your own way, or you really don't feel like yourself. And there are spiritual reasons for that. Sometimes, patterns, programs get mixed up. And I can give you some examples as we, take questions on this. But there are definitely, if you're feeling stuck, that's a good hallmark that this technique could be appropriate for you. If you're feeling like you can't get out of your own way, if you're feeling like you can't break a pattern that is holding you back from having joy, harmony, peace in your life, or achieving the things you want, this could be a good technique. And this technique, by the way, works for animals, businesses. I've done business clearings. I've cleared for animals and for people of all ages, children through adulthood. Some of the typical emotional or physical issues can be around allergies, weight issues, chronic pain, illness and disease, anxiety, fear, or lack consciousness type issues, changing false beliefs, perceptions, and attitudes, gaining greater clarity, balance, joy, or harmony, clearing stuck energies and repeating cycles, clearing past life energies and programs, and improving current relationships of all types. So we can do things around the energy dynamic, which is all part of our spiritual learning process. So those are some of the main things that we would use it for. So I think I'll stop there and see maybe if that feels like a good starting point, and then maybe if there's some questions, or I can give you some examples of how it works and who it would be good for. That sound good, Camille?
Yeah, that's a terrific overview. Actually, I have a lot of questions and a couple have come in. So about well, let me start. The first question I wrote down was, how long have you been doing SRT?
So as a client, I started with the technique with a practitioner out in Sedona, Arizona. So we did all of ours as phone sessions back in 2009. And after working with her, on and off every couple of months for a year, she said, you can learn to do this yourself. And I did. And so I went and took some classes and became a practitioner, I want to say 2011 or 12. So as a practitioner for about 7 years at this point.
Okay. And my next questions, so from the way you explained the beginning, the belief of this, and if you were a client, you had to believe that your destiny is kind of pre-created, and do you have a way of changing that? Because it's,
Well, I don't think I would say the
your
word
like soul
destiny.
comes
I think
down.
what happens with, yeah, well, you're basically coming down with a set of potentials, I think is a better way to look at it.
Okay, that's a good
Potential
word.
experiences that you would like to experience incarnated in your physical existence in a body, whatever body form you choose.
Okay.
Because again, this also works with animals. So you come down with, as I said, a curriculum of here's what I'd like to do while I'm here in this body, all the things I'd like to learn, experience, and your experience as a soul is on behalf of you as an individual soul, but also on the greater behalf of spirit from a learning perspective. So if you remember, I said, you get some core learning experiences handed to you in that packet from spirit, because spirit's also trying to learn. So we're all spiritual beings, right? We're all learning and experiencing all these different things in our current incarnation, and it's all for the purpose of spiritual learning. So yes, that's why I said, even with the clearing, what's cleared is cleared, but you, because you have free will choice, can choose to go back and replicate those things that we just cleared, because you have free will, and we don't prevent that. We are not preventing you from making. What we're trying to do is clear out the stuff that prohibits you from making positive free will choices. Now, I say positive, that doesn't mean everything's always happy. It's a positive choice on your part to make a conscious choice. Some of the things that happen to us are happening at the unconscious and subconscious level, and that's where like the energetic programs can get stuck. That's where SRT can be helpful, because it's those things that you can't consciously access yourself that might be making you stumble or stay in a stuck pattern or stay in a limiting pattern. And SRT can get at that level and clear up that blockage and let you get back to making a conscious, positive free will choice.
Okay. My next question has to do with the technique itself. So is the technique more that the person's sitting there quietly and you're kind of doing it? Is it like hypnosis? Are you questioning it, more like therapy?
There literally is nothing for the client to do besides make the appointment, and then, as I said, they don't even really have to show up in person, because I do offline clearings for people. So it's just having permission. The first step in the prep to work phase is asking permission to work with the high self. The client is actually not doing anything. It is a questioning technique, but the questions are really to help facilitate the pendulum and the connection of the information with the high self, the two high selves. So it's not, I'm not interrogating or interviewing the client per se. It's really asking the high selves, where are we going? What are we clearing? What does this person need to perhaps hear consciously, which I would be saying through the clearing. Oh, we go to chart 4 and this came up. Oh, okay, clear it. And there's something about the information that comes through that process that some things the clients need to hear and some things they don't. Spirit will just guide me through the process of having that connection, that just clear it. We don't need to explain it, just clear it. And there's a reason for that, because you don't need to get stuck in that energy. Sometimes you need to hear things for the purpose of learning. Sometimes we just need to clear it and move on.
Okay. So they're not always consciously aware of what you're clearing.
Yeah, it's just more for the client's conscious awareness when it's appropriate. Okay. High self always feel it's appropriate. They just sometimes say, just clear it and move on, so they can get on to the next thing.
And does it happen that a client could have a block that they're not aware of, and that you find, and you just mentioned that? That's what happens?
Yeah, that's what it is. A lot of our blocks are we have many layers of levels of consciousness, and in that incarnation process, which we don't have a lot of time to get into the details, there are 13, I think it's 18 minds and bodies, as we say, and some of them are conscious and some of them are subconscious minds. So there is that, where some of the programming is in the subconscious, and that's where you can't access it at a conscious level, but SRT can get there, through this technique.
Okay. All right. And we have some questions from our gallery. Paul, I see you raising your hand. I have your questions. Do you have other ones? Do you want to come online?
Yeah. Excuse me. So If I know somebody who is a disbeliever, can you clear somebody without them knowing?
Oh, good question.
That is a great question. The first step in the process is asking permission from high self. So I'll give you examples of where I have done, well, call a proxy clearing. A parent who is concerned that a child is struggling with something in, bullying or, some stress or anxiety, and the parent is the one who overtly gives me permission. But when I still go in to do the clearing for that child, I still am asking permission of the high self of the child. So your high self knows what you need. And so in your example, the person who is a disbeliever, there has to be some level, if you want that person to come and make an appointment, that's probably going to be pretty challenging, right? Because they're not going to want to do it. If you want to have someone do a clearing on behalf of someone else, then permission still has to be asked through the high self. And, high self will either acknowledge, yes, I want to go forward, or no, I don't.
In what cases so if the higher self is always looking out for the best of us, each one of us, my higher self's looking for mine, each person has their own, they're looking for their best possibilities. Why would the higher self ever say, no, stay away?
It's because we're all unique individuals, and there are some high selves that are not as educated. We always check to make sure high selves are up at the highest levels of spiritual consciousness as part of the technique. So you could have someone's high self that is at a lower level and doesn't quite get it, or doesn't believe that at this point that is in the best interest of that person.
Okay, thanks.
Sure, good question.
Oops. Paul had some other questions too. Is the clearing immediate or does it take time? Do they know it right away?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, yes, people do tend to feel a shift of energy quite quickly. So sometimes people will feel things in the session as we're going through it. They may feel physical sensations. They may feel like the physical sensation might just be a sense of energy moving, or they may feel, especially if they were feeling really down or negative, or felt like kind of pressed down, if you will, by the energy. A lot of times people experience a feeling of lightness. They can literally feel the weight of whatever those patterns were lifting off and out from them. The clearing, a lot of the clearing, because things are happening so much faster now with where we are spiritually in terms of ascension consciousness, the clearings are happening when most of it is processing in the session, but sometimes there is residual time after the session for it to completely process and clear, and it can be hours, days, or even weeks, depending on that unique individual person's circumstances and situation. And that is something that we do tend to check at the end of the session. I have a whole little checklist of things that I do, like a little energy body check and tune up to make sure all the energies are flowing as they need to be for that person. And if we are processing a lot of things, we will often check, completeness, accuracy, what percent has processed at this point as we end up with clearing, and how much more time would it take to complete that process. So you have a good idea by the time you leave.
So sometimes with some detox and other modalities, as it's being cleared, right? I'm going to use just a generic term of cleared out. There's just the opposite. There's kind of a sluggishness. Your body's, working to excrete and get rid of this. Do people ever experience that as well? Or is it more of the lightness that you described? So it could be
but it could be anything, but I have had clients who do feel very tired because, your whole body, your energy field, your consciousness, like your entire being is working really hard to throw that off. And sometimes you're tired because you're holding on to that energy like so tightly. And then when you release it, it's like muscle fatigue in a way. You're tired because you've been in that clenched up, shut down, stuck pattern for so long that you're just kind of, it hurts. It's exhausting. And so you do feel sometimes that physical tiredness. So I have had people say, and that was my experience too. I would sometimes feel really wiped out, like, wow, that was great, but I'm also like exhausted. I had to go take a nap. So it could be that, or people, came in, and I've had one client who came in, didn't even realize until we went through, just generally checking in and questioning, how's everything going and how are you feeling in your body, and, how do you feel generally before and after. And didn't realize that she came in and she said, oh, I came in here and I was so focused on, what we were going to be doing in the session. She said, I forgot I've had this really persistent knee pain. And at the end of the session, the knee pain was gone. And it was just a nice residual part of the clearing that whatever got cleared and rebalanced for her also ended up taking that pain out of her knee. So it's very, individual, like how people clear and how quickly they clear and what they feel. Some people are bouncing off the walls because they've got like lots of excess energy now. And other people are really tired because they've been working really hard, in the session at some energetic level, and they just need to relax and rebalance.
I'm curious, can people reach their own higher self in the same way that you reach them, or they have to be trained to do that?
Well, as I said in the beginning, everyone has the ability to connect with your high self. High self is part of you. So yes, you definitely can do it. The technique, I think, facilitates a more efficient way to maybe clear some of those things, and also gives you more tools to know how and what to ask so that you know what is possible. I have to say, I haven't found too many things where I couldn't apply this technique. It really does work in a lot of areas. I told you, business, all of the illness, injury, mental, emotional spectrum things, dynamics between relationships, making a decision, which is a better path for me, A or B, is this a good book to read? Yes or no? Is the source of this information the highest quality? And that, there are so many things that you can apply this technique to, because it's pendulum based and it's an inquiry technique, and you're connecting to your high self and asking, what's the highest good for me in this situation or in this path or decision. So we all have this ability to do it. It just, the SRT technique gives you a lot more efficient way to do it, to get through things and maybe do more things than you would think are possible.
Just to define high self, do you mean your own higher level of consciousness, or do you mean your, what I call collective consciousness from source, or who's watching over you? Does that make sense?
So we all have, as I said, we all have our own spiritual committees and our own helpers. So some of them, I'm going to give you an example, looking at this chart here, because there are so many in here, it's hard to remember them all. But we all have guides, we have guardian angels, we have high self, we have angels, masters, high councils, forces of light, the Holy Spirit, infinite councils, just all these other spiritual committee helpers and offices and roles. So each of us has that in our own existence. And at a spiritual level, we can be playing different parts of those roles for other people in our lives, in our soul family, or for people outside our soul family. So high self is really an aspect of you, as all of these spiritual committee members are. It's just that high self is the one that is most suited and works in the Akashic records, which is where we want to get to, because we're always trying to get to root cause of what is the thing that's blocking you, limiting you, holding you back. And that gets sourced up in the Akashic record.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Thank you. Anyone else? Paul, I see your hands raised again. Go ahead.
Well, I'll wait if other people have questions.
No. Go ahead.
So you mentioned that you started with a practitioner out in Sedona and worked with him or her for a while, and then decided that you were going to work on it yourself. So when you're working with clients, is there a particular amount of time that you work with somebody before maybe you recommend that they go off on themselves, or, what are the time frames? And I would imagine like there's always something that can be cleared.
There really is. And sometimes I laugh because like everyone else, we go through periods of struggle, and it's like the shoemaker's children. Sometimes I'm like, I really have to remember to stop and do a clearing myself. Because in the busyness of life, we forget, right? Because we're not going out to ask somebody else to do that. As far as, when and if it's appropriate for someone to go train in the technique, that's a very individual thing. There are many people that use SRT for years and years and years with individual practitioners, or they might contact the Spiritual Response Association, which is the certifying organization that provides all the curriculum and certifies the teachers and the consultants. They also have a consulting line worldwide. So many people will just come work with a consultant, work with a practitioner, or call the consulting line to have clearings done whenever that comes up as an issue or a need for them. Other people want more tools in their life to work with, whether they're working with clients or not, or just to help themselves and their family, and might feel called to take the class. So there's a basic class and there's an advanced class, and then there are some other ad hoc type classes that you can take along the way toward becoming a certified consultant or a teacher. And there are certain requirements in order to be a consultant and a teacher. So it's hard to say. It's really more what are people called for, just like any other modality. Sometimes, you go to a massage therapist for years, but you don't feel called to train to be a massage therapist. So, but I think this is a great technique for people to have in their life. It's just that, whether you feel called to go through the training is an individual decision. It's about a weekend, by the way. Each class is, I think, anywhere from 3 to 5 days, depending on which level class it is. So,
thank you. Larry, you had a question for Sue Ann?
I have several. First of all, thank you for getting up this early and joining us. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to the training to begin with. Is it in Sedona, or where does the training take place?
Oh, no, that's a great question. The practitioner I happen to connect with used to live in New Jersey, was one of the teachers that is in New Jersey. New Jersey is actually lucky because we have 3 or 4 certified teachers in New Jersey, and that's definitely not the case all around the country or the world. So in terms of when you want to take a class, the best thing to do is to check the SRA's website. And I think their website is spiritualresponse.org, but don't hold me to that. I'll have to check that or provide that after the webinar here. But they have classes all over the world, and the dates are well published ahead of time because they have only a certain number of certified teachers, and the teachers tend to travel around to those classes. So a group of, usually it's practitioners in the area, will want to host a class, or teachers who get a lot of inquiries will put a request in to have a class held in their area. And then the SRA will attempt to find a teacher, and they enroll a minimum number of people in that class, and then they'll hold the class. But they're all over the world, so you don't have to take one in your area. If you want to make a vacation out of it, you can go take an SRT class pretty much anywhere in the world. So that's how the training's done. And there are some practice groups, after you get into basic and advanced, or if you want to kind of keep your skills up, there are some local groups that do practice groups in different parts of the country, and some people even offer them online, like through Zoom or Skype, to with the community of practitioners. But you can take a class anywhere.
Good. The other question is, you speak about removing blocks and getting energy in the body, and you also said it works on disease. My question is twofold. Chronic fatigue syndrome and Addison's, does this work on those two?
I am not going to speak to specific diseases because the energy patterns and the limiting blocking part of illness, the illusion of illness, first of all, that, from a spiritual concept, is really what SRT is going to help address. So I would say if people do have chronic illness, it wouldn't be a bad move to try SRT to at least clean up some of the spiritual roots of why that experience happened for the person. And yeah, I would say it would be something that would be worth trying. Whether you need 1 session or more sessions, that would be based on how much, what spiritual healing and clearing up needs to happen, and how readily the client is ready to release that. This is why people end up coming for multiple sessions. Some things we're ready to release, and we're so done with that pattern, we want to get it out, and we're more than happy to have high self help us clear it. Other things we actually perceive as a benefit. Some illnesses, there is a benefit program hiding in there somewhere that you're having that experience because it's in some way perceived as a benefit. It could be that maybe because people give you attention. It could be because for some reason you need to experience a certain pattern of healing or love or affection or relationships. Who knows? It's so widely varied by people and circumstance. But it would certainly be an appropriate thing to try to at least help that person clean up the pattern that created the illness, and that might be keeping them stuck in the pattern of illness.
So there is really no specific healing connected to this other than individual and see how it goes. Am I correct?
Yeah, because it's an individual energy pattern and an individual set of experiences. So we're working with that person and their spiritual programs and their spiritual healing needs.
Okay,
and now there are certain protocols. For example, there's an actual allergy protocol, which has, you know, specific things to do. But if someone came to me with what you had, I would be doing a general clearing, because that's part of the protocol, to see what is ready to be cleared, and then we would go in and see if there is something that comes up that is ready to be cleared and released in the research phase that would address that particular. Again, we're not necessarily working, we're not going to necessarily see all the physical ramifications of that clearing right away, but it's going to help clean up the energetic roots of it and the spiritual roots of it, so that the rest of the healing pattern can do what it needs to do for that person.
So whatever the disease is, it's first a clearing and then seeing how it goes. It doesn't matter what the disease is, as I said before.
Yeah, that would be a good way to look at it. You always want to just clear up the spiritual roots of whatever those patterns are that are, you know, that cause that, produce that experience. And again, you may have made a positive free will choice at some level to stay in that experience, to have that illness. So, you know, it's not that necessarily it's going to erase it or clear it right away, because there are a lot of factors that go into why we all get into a pattern of illness.
Mm-hmm.
What has been your experience with cancer, with people that have a life or death experience, and some people that are stage 2, 3, or 4, where time is of the essence? Has this technique worked or helped people in that situation?
I haven't had a lot of direct experience with cancer patients for this technique, but I think just because of the severity of that, and because, again, a lot of, if not all, illness is rooted somehow in some kind of spiritual pattern or experience that we've chosen at some soul level to have, it would certainly be an appropriate thing to try as part of the overall care for that person.
Thank you.
There may be some spiritual healing that happens that makes that experience, you know, clearer for them, like why it happened for them, so that they can move forward with healing at other levels.
I've worked with people who work with spirit guides and with angels, and they sort of, I don't know how they do it, they sort of get them to watch over you during a certain period of time, even though they're with you your entire life. And there are specific archangels or whatever for various things that you may need in your life, and various guidance. Do you at any time work with them, or is this something entirely different?
No, I think that's really different than what we're talking about with SRT. As I said, the guardian angels and guides and other angels are certainly part of the spiritual healing team, but it's different than what we're talking about with SRT and clearing programs in the Akashic records.
Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on the line have any questions or something they want to ask Sue Ann before we wrap it up? Meryl, your hand's up. Hold on, let me unmute you. Go ahead.
Hello. My question is, how long are the sessions usually with you, and what do you charge?
Okay. The first session is, I always tell people, plan on an hour and a half. And I believe it's 175 for that session. I have to look in my book, but yes, it's about, and then after that, you're really in the term of probably anywhere from a 30-minute to a 60-minute session, depending on what the next clearings look like or what issues you want to work on. And there tends to be a healthy interval, meaning at least a couple of days or weeks between the first session and any follow-up sessions. Main reason being, we need time to process, assimilate, and integrate that clearing and sort of rebalance afterwards. So, you know, you would come for an initial session, either Skype, Zoom, or in person, and then we would go through the technique, you know, in more detail than we've had time to go through here today, do the clearing, right, and then any questions or specific follow-ups that come out of that session. Sometimes there are things, you know, people need to do, or other modalities that come up as a recommended output for next best step for them. And then really I leave it up to the client. I mean, I can tell, you know, at the end of the session, I can tell you, you know, Spirit says, don't come back for like 2 months, or, you know, wait at least 2 weeks, you know, so you process this clearing, and then see how you're feeling. See if you feel like you need to clear more. So that, you know, and what's next, you know, you may be looking at things differently, and something that was a pressing issue for you when you came in the door for this first session, because it got cleared and released all of a sudden, now, you know, you're focuses in a different direction, and you say, oh, well, now I want to learn about that. Why am I being held back in that area? And we'll come in and do a clearing on a totally different issue, which is perfectly fine. So it really, I like to leave the initial session with a set of follow-ups and takeaways. I also do teach people the emotional freedom technique as a takeaway from that initial session, so that you have a tool to use at home. Because once your awareness is more focused on, okay, I feel out of balance, or I feel stress or anxiety or something bubbling up, that's a great take-home technique that you can use. It's also known as tapping, the EFT emotional freedom technique. So everybody gets a little tutorial with that. So and sometimes, that just gets them on the path they need to be, and they may not come back for clearing for, a couple of weeks, months, or even a year, because everything is, going well for them, and then they're not feeling as stuck as they were. But typically, first session, hour and a half, 175. After that, it's they're based on an hourly rate, so it's usually about 65 for 30 minutes or 115 for an hour.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Excellent, thank you. That's a good question. Anyone else? Any questions for Sue-Ann before we wrap up? Okay, I think we're good. Sue-Ann, thank you so much for doing this for us today. This was really, really exciting and really, really interesting.
Thank you.
Paul's clapping, so I can see. So I knew nothing about it, so I love when we have member spotlights of things that I know nothing about, so we can ask really good questions. And these are recorded so they can go out on our YouTube channel for the general public, so they can ask a lot of questions too. And I love being the catalyst for people out there just searching for answers. So thank you so much for coming out tonight and meeting us on Zoom and being a part of this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and I should probably give contact information for people.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you can contact me at fifthdimensionhealingenergy@gmail.com. So that's fifth, F-I-F-T-H, dimension healing energy @gmail.com. Phone number is 908-730-0658. Feel free to leave a message. And there's a website, fifthdimensionhealingenergy.net, has some more information on SRT as well as some other energy healing modalities. And yeah, I think that's it. But that would be the best ways to connect and ask questions to see if the clearing is right for you. And we usually do at least a 15-minute kind of pre-call, discovery call, to talk a little bit about it, see if it's right for you, and then book your appointment, and off we go, clearing in the Akashic Records for you. So
excellent. Thank you again, and thanks everyone for joining us and coming out this morning.
Thanks a lot.